1643 in the name of Graham Day, on behalf of the Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform Committee on Air Quality in Scotland inquiry. I invite those members who wish to speak in the debate to press their request to speak buttons now, and I call on Graham Day to speak and move the motion on behalf of the committee. 9 minutes, please, Mr Day.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's my privilege as Convener of the Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform Committee to open this debate on our inquiry into air quality in Scotland. As is now widely accepted, poor air quality is one of the greatest environmental threats to human health. Elevated pollution levels, particularly in urban areas with high volumes of road traffic, are linked with numerous health issues, including heart disease and lung cancer. Air pollution also has damaging effects on the environment. In light of that, and having carried out an earlier piece of work on these matters, the health aspects were taken by the committee at the start of the inquiry as a given. We focused the inquiry on the actions the government was taking to improve the air we breathe. In particular, the committee homed in on the government's Cleaner Air for Scotland strategy and whether it contains the right policies, support and incentives to adequately tackle air pollution. Having the right strategy is clearly only half the battle, of course. We also need the mechanisms in place, led by local government and national agencies, to implement that strategy. Before I get into the detail of the committee's findings, please let me, on behalf of the members, thank all of those who contributed to the inquiry. Committee scrutiny is only as good as the evidence it receives, and we wouldn't have been able to produce what I hope is a comprehensive report without that help. Let me acknowledge also the part played in shaping the report by David Stewart MSP, who left the committee towards the end of the work we were doing, but whose fingerprints are to be found on various aspects of it, and who I can tell is chomping at the bit to make a contribution to this afternoon's debate, as indeed is Emma Harper, who, along with other former members, Maurice Golden and Alexander Burnett, played their part too. Turning to our findings, I'll seek to provide an overview of the committee's work, as well as focusing in on a couple of areas. I'm sure colleagues will develop these further in the course of the afternoon and indeed highlight other aspects of the committee's scrutiny. Let me start with the Cleaner Air for Scotland strategy itself. The committee heard mixed views on the strategy. While many were supportive of its high-level aspirations and that it was broadly taking us in the right direction, questions were asked about whether the necessary support and incentives were in place on the ground to get us where Scotland needs to go. And Scotland does need to make improvements. There are EU air quality targets for 2020, which this country has to comply with. SEPA were confident we would meet this deadline, others weren't so sure. We also heard that the strategy is a living document, yet we found the yearly update on the progress of its 34 actions to be insufficient. Future iterations need to be more transparent, we believe, in order that progress or otherwise can be readily tracked. In terms of its delivery, we were concerned, despite welcome assurances from ministers, that there was a degree of disconnect between national agencies and local authorities in delivering these actions. That's particularly prescient given the current review of planning policies. If new developments take place without public transport or active travel infrastructure, we'll simply be increasing the number of cars on our roads, albeit the move towards electric vehicles would, of course, mitigate that. In terms of tangible actions, one of the main areas we looked at was low-emission zones. Just after we launched our inquiry, the government announced that there would be 4 LEZs in Scotland: Glasgow by the end of 2018, then Aberdeen, Dundee and Edinburgh by 2020. We therefore focused our attention on what this would look like in practice. It was immediately clear that we wouldn't have an all-singing, all-dancing LEZ in operation in Glasgow by the end of this year. Not that I think any of us believed that would actually be the case. Designing an LEZ and having the technology in place is one thing. Allowing users, from bus companies to delivery firms to private car owners, to update their vehicles to comply with LEZs clearly requires more time. We asked what LEZs would actually look like, when they would be implemented and how technology would fit in. In terms of what vehicles should be covered by the zones, the committee recommended that for LEZs to best contribute to overall improvements in air quality, cars should be included. It's now clear, Presiding Officer, that emissions from diesel vehicles have a massive impact on the air that we breathe. As Dr Scott Hamilton of Recard Energy and Environment said to the committee, I'm 100% sure that most of that problem has arisen from there being too much diesel in the car fleet, in the wrong place, at the wrong time, in the wrong technology. The problem here, of course, is we would now be penalising people for making a vehicle choice they were encouraged by government to make in the past, when they were told this would benefit the environment. I might count myself amongst that group. Yet while that may well seem unfair and indeed undermine public trust in environmental messaging, the fact is we need to do this. Given the technical and financial resources required to implement LEZs, the committee recommended that the Scottish Government, local authorities and relevant public agencies work jointly to ensure that any and all available technology is shared to help ensure a consistent and efficient approach across Scotland. In evidence, the Government said that good collaboration was already underway between the cities, and when we spoke to officials from Glasgow, they clearly had a real command of the subject and a very clear understanding of the issues in their city. Issues vary city by city, though, and each will pose different challenges. While positives are there, the committee asked for an update on all 4 LEZs by the end of June this year, along with an indication of the dates in which they will come into force. Moving on to the issue of active travel, the committee was clear that no matter how effective LEZs are, or how alternatively fuelled vehicles might be, in order to reduce emissions and meet both air quality and wider climate change targets, we need to increase the number of journeys made by bike to 10% and beyond. The Government's 10% target by 2020 was raised repeatedly during the course of the inquiry, but despite positive assurances from Transport Scotland, the committee struggled to find other evidence to back the belief that we are on course. Indeed, the latest figures we had from 2016 showed that the number of journeys made by bike had risen only by 0.2% in 6 years. Going by this rate, it would take us to 2,252 to reach the target. We don't need to look far to see success in this area. In the Netherlands, widely regarded as one of the best countries in Europe for cycling, 27% of all journeys are made by bike, with that figure rising to 36% in Amsterdam. Now, while Amsterdam clearly isn't built around 7 hills like Edinburgh is, the difference is nevertheless stark. While the committee recognised and welcomed the recent sizeable increase in the active travel budget, it considered that segregated cycling infrastructure is going to be required to give people the confidence to get on their bikes. While much of the report focused on urban transport, air quality is also a rural issue, and the committee agreed that work needs to take place across the country to combat the problem. We were surprised to find that agricultural pollutants aren't included in the Cleaner Air for Scotland strategy. We heard calls for nitrogen fertilisers to be used more efficiently, and were encouraged to learn of innovative techniques used in other countries to help limit the amount of pollutants escaping into the atmosphere. While there are clearly financial costs involved in introducing new farming techniques, the committee recommended that the Scottish Government provide guidance to the agricultural sector on how it might adopt these, as well as consider what incentives might be offered to help accelerate the use of new methods. The strategy should also be updated to reflect how agricultural pollutants might be reduced in the coming years. To conclude, Presiding Officer, can I thank committee colleagues for their sterling and typically constructive cross-party working on this inquiry, and welcome this opportunity to air, no pun intended, this hugely important subject in the Chamber. I also look forward to perhaps hearing the Cabinet Secretary's initial thinking on the inquiry report and, beyond today, the Government's full response to the recommendations. Presiding Officer, I realise that in opening the debate I'm concluding a little ahead of my allotted time. That's not so much to curry favour with yourself, albeit that's never something to be shied away from, but to allow committee colleagues and others the optimum time to offer their thoughts on this topic. And I move the motion in my name.
Thank you. And flattery, of course, will get you nowhere. I call on Rosanna Cunningham, please. Cabinet Secretary to open for the Government. 8 minutes, please.